Welcome to the India Deep Tech podcast series hosted by TDK Ventures. I'm Vishal Krishna, the founder of the UpStreamLife.com, and I've got a special guest today. I've got Anil Achyuta, the managing director of TDK Ventures, who's here to discuss the investment thesis in India and how we are building a deep tech community in this country. Hi Anil, how are you?
I'm doing great, Vishal. How are you?
Man, it's been 35 years of knowing each other, and I tell you one thing, we're going to talk cricket, we're also going to talk investments, but let's start off. How did you become a deep tech guy? What interested you in deep tech?
I was always into science, and my dad is a science teacher, as you know. I come from an entire family of science people, and it just was a natural progression for me, right from undergrad. And when I went to graduate school, I feel like I got much more serious into the development of technology. Until then, I was interested in studying and academics, but fundamentally, I come from a house of teachers. So I guess your environment defines you.
Yes, I mean that transition that you made, right, from sports to academics and then from academics to investing. I will get into that in detail in the end, but I want to talk about your investment thesis. When you look at global level events like energy transitions, digital transformation, how do you track all that, Anil? How do you keep in mind that this is how the world is moving, this is the investment that I have to make, this is the company that I have to invest in, this is the entrepreneur that I have to bet on? How do you look at that?
I guess that comes down to our entire investment thesis from TDK Ventures. We invest in two main megatrends: digital transformation and energy transformation. And partly, we think it's all around us, right? I mean, look at what you're doing right now. You have a cell phone, and you're looking into the questions, and it's all digitally transcribed.
Correct.
So just fast forward that. I would imagine that you will have a little bit of a display here, and the display will pop up, and it'll be clean. No one can see it, and you will have a seamless interaction with the outside world. And I would say that the technologies that enable these are all part of our investment thesis. And similarly, on energy side, you could think about how did you come here?
Yes.
You told me that you came in an EV.
Yes.
So where do the batteries come from? Where does the technology come from? Where did you charge? How did you get the charge? Of course, you got it from some place or the other. The KEV delivered that electricity or electrons to your car. And to me, just that journey, thinking about these little objects that provide solutions to people to make their life better. We think about this all day long. And once you start getting into these objects and you open these up, you will start realizing there are certain enabling technologies that help them to get to a certain level. And there are amazing people who do that. And there are people who build technology, there are people who build product, and there are people who build great companies. And we love people who build companies. So how we go through that is just a part of our parlance on a daily basis.
This is amazing. This sets the context for so many questions. This is the India Deep Tech series, of course. India is known for great science. I've always raised this in the past that our scientific community writes a lot of papers, but they don't understand the commercial aspects of it. You've been tracking it as well in the past. You were part of MS Ramaya, then you went to ISC as well, I remember. Again, engineering and great science institution. How should scientists look at becoming great entrepreneurs? Do they learn it, or do you say that they are born with it? Entrepreneurs are born and not just, they don't learn on the job at it, right?
I would want to be cautious here because I do not believe that every scientist should be an entrepreneur. And
fair point.
Because there are people who are extraordinarily good at science, and it's good that they do science. Now, there is advanced science and there's applied science. And there are some people who are really, really good at that advanced science, but some people are good at applied science. And there are some other people who somehow really fall in love with problems. And the ones who fall in love with problems are the ones who tend to become entrepreneurs, because they don't want to think about solutions. If you meet the greatest entrepreneurs, what they'll tell you is, I'm looking for a problem. They don't care about the technology.
Give me an example, because a lot of people in India would want to know with examples that, okay, this is what you mean.
I mean, it could be anything, right? I mean, pick the problem we just talked about, the hologram.
Yes.
Heads-up display or display without any sort of wearable, right?
Yes.
The first question that the entrepreneur will ask is, well, what is the technology that enables it? The scientist would ask,
Yes.
what is the technology that enables it? But the entrepreneur will ask, okay, what is the customer problem am I solving here, right? And they would always go towards use cases that have a customer pain point. And maybe they'll think a lot more about an industrial case where you have helmets, or you're wearing some sort of you're in an environment that's noisy, there are no screens. They always look out for those problems, right? And that's the entrepreneur way of looking at it. The science way of looking at it is purely looking at the technology and maybe micro LED, how do you stack up layers, and you can go deep into that. And you need both parts of this. But the entrepreneurs are the ones who take a technology and convert those into products, those products into solutions, and those solutions make a difference in people's lives.
These transitions that one has to make, into becoming an entrepreneur. When I talk to you, I see somebody who's transitioned from the science into the world of business and investing. Again, did it come naturally, or was it applied, learnt?
That's a good question. I felt like I fell in love with problems right from the beginning, because I always tried to find meaning in what I did. And whenever you try to find meaning in some things, you always go back to the roots of, okay, why am I doing this? Because there's a lot of people who know what they're doing. There's a lot of people who know how they're doing what they're doing. And there's very few people who know why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing it, right? So I always kind of thought about, why am I doing this? And I felt that a deep yearning on, I should know why I'm doing what I'm doing, the science that I was practicing. And the more and more I got into innovations, my PhD was in part neuroscience, part chemical engineering, making brain implants quite stealthy. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized this is farther out into commercialization. And that made me feel not so great about myself, because what is the point of all of this knowledge when it doesn't make an impact into human beings? Now, I'm not saying people who do basic research are not thinking the right way. It just felt more missionary to me to think about why more. And that just gave me every time I came up with a new innovation, I always thought about why. And that helped me to make the transition very easy. Because for investing, it's very straightforward, right? You invest in companies, and companies make products, and products are turned into solutions. And those solutions create jobs, they make the world a better place, and they also solve problems. So to me, that when you do that at scale, the why becomes very easy, and I'll never have to ask the why. Like you won't see me asking why every 5 minutes, right? It's already in my mind, and I'm already doing it.
See, that's fantastic. That's like a golden nugget, as like you guys said in the podcast, right? But I want to ask you this: building deep tech ventures takes time, right? And it requires a lot of capital. And you've written in blogs in the past saying dream syndicates, partnerships. That's how you're doing this in India, CVCs, partnerships.
Doing this
across the world.
Yes.
So that's what I want to ask you about. First question number one, that a lot of the Indian science community or scientific entrepreneurial community, they say that, look, there isn't enough patient capital coming through. But that's where I would recommend you guys to go read his blog on dream syndicates. You want to explain quickly what these syndicates could be, and because you're doing something similar year, and you're calling for a lot of partners within India, and why patient capital is important for deep tech? Or is patient capital a myth at this point in time?
No, patient capital is a real thing. Deep tech companies don't take off the hockey stick as a regular SaaS or a software company does. And that's the sort of the baseline, and everybody knows that it's an occupational hazard. And the next part is really that great companies are built with lots of help from the ecosystem.
Yes.
And when you are looking at a phone like this,
Yes.
you know, it's got a battery, it's got a sensor, it's got a screen, it's got a display, it's got cameras, it's got so many components in it, right? So if you're building something in the deep tech world, whether it's an eVTOL like a flying car, or you're building a battery company, or you're building an AI company that has hardware in it, then the key component of that is institutional financial capital, right? Which is the financial investors that truly bring that extra additional capital, and they can follow on and so on. So that's the first ingredient of the Dream Syndicate. The second ingredient of the Dream Syndicate is what we call as go-to-market partners. The go-to-market partners are people who help you figure out exactly where to go and where not to go. The not to go is quite important, because you can get lost in these. Like, let's say you make an electrolyzer that makes lots of hydrogen.
Yeah.
Imagine you go and start trying to make cars out of it, or powering cars. That is a 10-year journey, and likely a journey that you will fall. And you need to understand exactly who you should take help from.
I get this, navigating complexity.
Correct. Go to market.
Yes.
The third piece is what I call as ecosystem strategic.
Yes.
The ecosystem strategic always brings components, like if you're building a phone, you'd want to partner with the battery supply chain. You would want to partner with the guys who make the glass, and so on and so forth. So I think when these three powers combined, you get what we call as a Dream Syndicate. And these partners will not just help you in giving you capital along your journey, they'll also help you in establishing supply chains. Remember what happened during COVID?
Yes.
The whole supply chains were completely broken across.
And you said that because in COVID, I was surprised that America and Europe was also bad with the logistics during the COVID, and India had done a very good job. I mean, it's true. I mean, a lot of the world has changed also with the complexity, right?
Yes, I mean, if I have to give you an example, the reserves for the United States in food is about 30 days. So if something really bad happened, they only have 30 days worth of food. I mean, that is scary.
That is scary, because I know that India has 1 year stockpile, or 1 or 2 years of stockpile of food.
I don't know about India,
but it's interesting.
And the world being global, if you don't have food, I mean, fertilizer comes from Russia, right? NPK, or nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, all of that comes from Russia. And these supply chains can be quite complex. With one macro perturbation, you can pretty much forget about startup, your whole country will be down, right? So in my view, building deep tech companies, you have to build it for resiliency. And those resilient times come with partners that can help you along the way in your journey.
What made you write that blog? I mean, the fact that you travel across the world and you notice these supply chains, you notice these technologies make impact in these countries. Do you see countries themselves struggling with these technologies?
So I think the Dream Syndicates was something that many people think about. And if you're building a company, I'm positive people think about it. The reason why I shared it was because I don't want this to be a secret.
Okay.
I want people to think that building these hard tech or deep tech companies is not easy. And you need help from sovereign wealth funds, from the government, from private equity, from venture capital. We need to come together to solve bigger problems. And I just feel that much of people who are building these companies are not sharing with the rest of the world because I'm not sure why, but I just feel strongly that when we share this to the outside world, people can replicate this and build greater companies.
Okay, I want to take a quick segue into what you're doing in India, right? I mean, this is exactly what you want to build. In fact, we are at your center where you want a lot of people to come in, partner with TDK Ventures. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess when we started TDK Ventures India, our goal was to create what we call as a hub, innovation hub, meaning we want people to understand that deep tech ventures are critical for India's growth, and we want to talk about these problems, exchange ideas, exchange solutions, and exchange opportunities in an open manner. And if you are sitting in one room and not sharing these opportunities, we feel that that doesn't jive well with our core value, which is adding value to society. So for us, we want to create an ecosystem of players who will come in and invest in these companies and support them along the way. So it's a pretty straightforward thing. We want to build great companies. That's where we start from the bottom. We want to see iconic generational companies that will transform India and the world. And in order to do that, we need to be able to partner with different people and build it along the way. Because as I shared with you, one small perturbation can mean 2 years of runway loss for a startup. And in order to keep them going, we need supporters of these companies to have that patient capital and support them along the way. I mean, look at Tesla, for an example, right? If you had invested in Tesla and took out money in 2009, that I'm sure a lot of people did that. I don't want to name names, but I know a lot of people did that. But they all lost on the upside. So these deep tech companies take a longer horizon, even maybe after the IPO, and sometimes they blossom at the end, and that upside will be gone. So and it's not just the upside. Again, it's the number of jobs you create, the number of offshoots you create, right? I mean, look at Tesla again, have created an entire EV revolution. There's not a single OEM in the world today that's not doing EVs.
Let's give them a data point, and you would agree with that. I think the Department of Energy in the US had said that by 2014, only 2,000 or 3,000 EVs would be shipped. But Tesla was already shipping
70,000,
70,000, something of that sort. Right?
And by 2035, they had projected some 10,000, something like that. I can't remember the number, but they were off in 3 years by 20 years.
Yeah.
So the experts sometimes don't really get these numbers right.
You're reading my mind. My next question wasn't the experts, right? Intuition tells us, I mean, your intuition tells you that this is the industry, but the experts will tell you, based on past data, they say, why do flying cars? Why do green hydrogen? Why do grid modernization, right? And then, I mean, you as an investment director, how do you sit down and say that, okay, experts are saying that something is good, that they have their critical analysis. How do you sit down and say that, you know, this is it, this is what we have to go after? And you've done autoflight, you've done Ascend Elements, battery recycling is something that I'm very fond of. And then green hydrogen, Verdaji, right, they're coming into India as well very soon. They're talking to a few people. So how do you take punts on this? It's like a sport for you, right? I mean, how do you take punts on
it? It is a sport.
Versus these experts who are saying, don't do it.
Yeah, it is a sport, a serious one.
A serious sport, yes.
And first thing I need to do is give credit where the credit is due. This was a talk from Vinod Khosla, and he talks about this, about experts and them being wrong. So I do want to give a shout out to Vinod here. But I want to come back to the question, which is, how do we take these kind of big bets?
Yes.
Right? Traditionally, since the 1950s or maybe even 40s, one might argue, venture capital was always taking these big bets. It was not always people simply did SaaS and fintech and dating apps and this kind of stuff, right?
You're talking about the Intels of the world. I know what the early Intel.
Exactly, the venture capital was this: the biotech revolution, the Intel, the chip revolution, the computer revolution. All of these were actually spurred by venture capitalists. So it's not there's not a single day that goes by where I'm not thinking about some crazy idea. I mean, we talked about it yesterday about human-like robots in the house with large language models,
Yes.
teaching our children how to solve 2x plus 3 equals 6, solve for x, or teach something about astrophysics today, something like this, right? So there's not a single day that goes by that we don't think about this kind of things. And I would say it is the job of a venture capitalist to think about the future all the time. And sometimes it does work out, sometimes it doesn't, and ultimately power law takes its due course, and one investment returns the entire fund, and perhaps all the others fizzle out. So this is why you never judge a venture capitalist by one investment.
Yeah.
You always look at their portfolio. So I would say that much of this is coming back to our original investment thesis, that Autoflight, Ascend Elements, and Verdagy stand for electrification or electrifying everything, which is flying vehicles. Ascend Elements is to mass market electrified vehicles, consumer vehicles, which can only happen if the cost of the vehicle comes down. And the only way to do that very quickly without changing battery chemistry is to recycle them.
Recycle.
Right?
Because the elements that go into it are not
Right.
going to last
And you don't have
forever,
to dig the earth.
Yeah.
So it's good for the planet, good for profit, and you're adding societal value. So third was about Verdagy, and the thesis there was, look, there are heavy emitting industries out there that are generating carbon dioxide, and think of this phone you're sitting with, the cover that's making it is plastic, and the plastic is always made of hydrocarbons, and there's hydrogen and carbon, or carbon dioxide in some ways, and that hydrogen has to be generated somehow. So making green hydrogen for petrochemicals, or even in steel or cement, are the applications that we were thinking about to basically reduce emissions of the industry. And if you can make it using renewable power, then that would be a complete game changer. So for us, we are always thinking about what's going to happen in 5 to 7 years, and trying to constantly time the market. Like I said, sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't.
Again, going back to first principles thinking, that's something that you've always told me, and we've always had conversations over coffee about first principles. What does that mean to you? You've again written a blog called Fit Principles, and I would recommend people to go read that blog, just simply because you've laid the foundation in terms of a weightlifter doing a snatch, and a weightlifter will only be successful if your hips are stable, and that's how you could pull out a snatch, right? So what do you mean by first principles thinking in investments, and what does the Fit blog mean to you? Why did you put that out?
Again, whenever I write something, it is literally to share to the world how I'm thinking. I don't want this to be a secret. And it's not just me. My boss, Nicola, shares everything that he learns. He does a podcast called CVC Insider. So this kind of stuff should never be kept in secret, in my view, because this is basic thing. The real more advanced thing is to actually build these companies. That is the real work. I don't think what we do is half as difficult as what the entrepreneurs do. So first principles based investment thesis is really about writing an investment thesis with about 5 to 7 years, thinking about the future. Who is going to be the king of the hill, or what we call as the market leader in about 5 to 7 years? And it's a little bit like exercising, right? You don't see the results right away, but you see it in the end. You see your body shape coming into the right way. So it's about building muscle and trying to exercise the understanding of what a future looks like today. And it's very hard to do for many people. And for that, you have to understand there are certain building blocks that drive the future. And sometimes one would think that that's just guesswork, but what we are saying is it's not guesswork. There is a certain methodology to take the right steps, and you'll be able to get there.
I mean, again, like you said, not many people can think about today, and I mean, you have to think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
We're not investing for today.
Yeah,
We're investing for the
absolutely.
future.
I mean, are you a guy who works with too much data? How do you inference things on it? I mean, like you said, I mean, I was surprised. They said, why do you need look at the case of this, right? And you said, and I was saying, isn't it metal or inside? But you said, look at the plastic. You need hydrocarbons for that, right? I mean, it was interesting. You're thinking through how these industries.
We have to.
What are the roots of these industries?
We
right?
must. I mean, when I look at objects like light like this, camera like this, I'm always thinking about where does this come from? What is the supply chain of this? Who makes this? Why are they making it? How is it made? What is the energy balance? What is the mass balance? What is the water consumption? This is the kind of stuff that we always think about. And if we don't think like this, we can never think about the future.
It's very different from regular investing, I must tell you. It's not software.
I mean, there's a lot of science in software as well. It's just that for us, when we look at it from a daily pair of eyes, if we don't think like this, we're not going to decarbonize our planet.
Yeah.
We're going to be burning fuel. I mean, can you imagine how barbaric this sounds? We are burning stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't be burning stuff.
Yeah.
We're in the 21st century.
That's so
I mean,
true.
if aliens came in and saw us burning coal,
Yeah, they'd be surprised.
just-
What kind of technology do
it
these
just
guys
feels so strange that we're using dead dinosaurs to power ourselves. Everyday electricity is coming from coal. It just feels strange. So I would rather think about where porcelain comes from, what are its constituents, what kind of engineering we can do to make it much more sustainable, cheaper.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we want everybody to have these resources, right? We want everybody to be very prosperous and lead a good life. And for that, we as engineers
Yeah.
have a responsibility to think through first principles.
This is interesting. So you look at your investments like that. Entrepreneurs should look at the problem and how they're going to solve the go-to-market.
They already
Absolutely.
think like this.
Yes.
Right? Because they've already thought about it and they find a customer problem. And there lies the magic, right? Because we're thinking about it and we are coming at it from a certain direction because we've seen A, B, C, D, right? Like we've looked at electrifying, vehicles that go on the ground, off the ground, right? And we were just thinking, okay, if we are flying vehicles, how far does it go? And we were like, oh, okay, there's a theoretical limit on electrified batteries. Why? Because batteries are damn heavy. They're super heavy.
Payload.
Yeah, the payload. And then we were like, oh, okay, how do you fly further? And then we said, oh, okay, then we need to create different types of hydrocarbons that are based off of capturing carbon and then electrolyzed or green hydrogen. When you combine them, you get what we call a sustainable aviation fuel. And we made an investment in Ineratech recently. And
What's the company again, partner?
it's called Ineratech.
Ineratech.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a German company, and they're making a sustainable aviation fuel where you could take long flights, and there is a regulation that's coming in Europe in 2025. They have to start using this kind of stuff,
So regulations are driving that
Yes.
innovation.
and that's again, as an investor, we have to understand why now. It's a most important question because there has to be some sort of an impetus, whether it is a technological advancement, it could be a regulation, it could be a macro shock, it could be interest rates, it could be various other factors. And understanding that 5 to 7 year time frame is super important. We don't get it right always, but once in a while when we get it right, we are very, very right.
Anil, this podcast has been great because, I mean, you look at government also as a partner in a way. You mentioned this company that you invested in Germany. The regulation drove them to innovate. And do you think the government in India should do something similar? CVC partners, governments getting together world over. I mean, let's say governments, corporates get together, be part of the syndicate and help the scientific community or deep tech community?
I think the government will always play a massive role in deep tech because of first they promote science and technology through grants. So some of these companies take IP from that was developed in a maybe a defense contract or some other energy contract, something like this. Perfect example is Ascend Elements, one of my companies that got a whopping $480 million from DOE as a grant to build their first factory. So I would say that the combination of government dollars that come into startups is already happening in the US. It's happening in Europe, and it's definitely happening in India. And I would hope that the government has more incentives for people to come in and scale up manufacturing, because manufacturing is hard.
Huh. Yeah, that's true. And you said Ascend Elements. I want you to mention them, and also AM batteries, right? Why are these two? Because India is now going through the EV revolution, to speak. There's so many EV cars coming in. What do you think of AM batteries and Ascend Elements? Why are they important as investments to you?
I mean, Ascend Elements, both are very important to me because I invested when there were less than 10 people. And when you invest in companies when there are less than 10 people, you realize that it becomes a part of your life. It's almost like your hand, right? You can't do without it. And sometimes you just understand that it almost consumes you in some way, in the nice way. And so personally, it's very important to me. Second, it's very important for the planet because, as I mentioned, with Ascend Elements technology, the OEM or the battery manufacturer or the combo thereof can reduce the cost of the battery, and you give them access to raw materials, nickel, cobalt, manganese, or even a full-on cathode or a precursor that is used to make cathode. And that means that you just have to urban mine. You don't have to dig the earth. And it's almost like these resources are limited. And you can create almost like an eternal chain of circular economy with this. And that to me is super exciting.
Don't burn, don't dig.
Yeah, exactly. Don't burn, don't dig. I mean, you should dig in order to get enough materials, but once you dig, you recycle, right? It's a very important feature of the EV revolution. On AM batteries, one of the core parts of battery manufacturing is a step called solvent evaporation. The battery powders, the cathode powders, have a solvent called NMP, and evaporating that solvent is about 50% of the energy cost. 50%. So just one step. There are multiple steps in battery manufacturing. You'll see like a robot coming in doing all that stuff. That's nothing. The evaporation is the one that takes up 50% of the cost, so of the energy. And if you can get rid of that step, you can reduce the price of the battery. And again, it's all based off of mass market adoption. Right?
Can they use green hydrogen there?
Sorry?
In a way, in that step?
Not really, because the way this AM batteries uses their process is they take powders and directly deposit on. It's almost like 3D printing, right?
Yeah.
They deposit the powder on the foil, and then you stack and roll the foil. And doing that is so much more energy efficient that it will truly revolutionize battery manufacturing. And the other part of the ecosystem that needs help on battery manufacturing is the equipment. Most of the equipment that's in battery manufacturing comes from China. And whenever you have one country dominating the entire world, that is not a good thing. So it's good to have multiple competition from various parts of the world.
A little more decentralized and safer.
Yeah. So I would say
geopolitically safer.
Correct. And I would say both AM batteries and Ascend Elements create more profits for the EV OEMs, help mass adoption of EVs, and reduce carbon emissions.
Okay, I just want to ask you the operation of these cathode powders, right? What type of energy do they use in these factories?
So it's a good question. Depends on where you are.
Okay.
Right? Sometimes you're close to a hydroelectric plant, so you get most of your energy from hydroelectric.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get lots of sun, like if you're in a warm place. Then you can use a lot of sun, solar energy. But many parts of the world, including China, you use coal. And
That can be
yeah, so
detrimental.
the part that is important here is there is going to be revolution in how the energy is used, how the energy is consumed, and how the energy is stored. Because sometimes, even in manufacturing like steel, for example, or cement, there's lots of hot stuff, steam and other products that are there. You can take heat and convert that into a heat battery, and you can store heat and turn that into electrons. So again, we are thinking very deeply about decarbonizing heat as we speak. So we are now developing a thesis or a first principles-based investment thesis on heat and learning about various parts of the heat.
Are there startups there in that segment? Not
Absolutely yes.
Yes.
Absolutely yes.
Is that an opportunity for any Indian startup if they're doing this?
Yes, there is a huge opportunity because India is a massive steel producer.
Yes, correct.
And Larsen and Toubro, and there's so many cement companies here, Reliance, Zindal,
Sale.
and even Mittal.
Sale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have lots and lots of heat in India. And even low temperature heat is also interesting. So all the examples I gave you is 1000-degree plus, right? About 200 degrees is also very important for sterilization, steam sterilization, dairy industry, food industry. You use about 200-degree steam, and it's a very, very important byproduct.
You're reading my mind again. The next question was exactly about this. How are these segments of industries changing? I'm going to read them out to you. Quick answers. Automotive, how are they changing a bit deeper? EVs.
That's it.
Straightforward, that's that.
I mean,
a lot of people would say, hey, why EV? Hydrogen's better. I'm just throwing it out there for you.
I mean, hydrogen, one of the things with hydrogen is the round trip efficiency of converting hydrogen into an electron is very low. And you have to create hydrogen, you have to compress it. Hydrogen has a very high volumetric energy density. And then you have to transport it. Hydrogen is unsafe. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it. It can be very dangerous. And then
Can we call it volatile?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is volatile, highly volatile. And then you have to bring it to the car or the vehicle and dispense it and then convert it into an electron, right? For it to move. And it's getting consumed over time, and you don't have something like regenerative braking. It's a one-way reaction, right? So I'm not sure if consumer EVs will be a ever thing with hydrogen. I'm sure Toyota would disagree with me.
Yeah, they're hybrids, yes.
But I would say that there is a case to be made for hydrogen in potentially in maritime, like shipping industry. There are some people who are talking about hydrogen in aviation as well. I haven't been fully convinced, but I think there's
mostly on the commercial side, manufacturing side. Do you see more hydrogen that side? No.
Yes,
right.
Hydrogen is clear in cement, steel, ammonia, fertilizer production, petrochemical production, etc. Those industries, absolutely, and sometimes even long duration energy storage.
Got it. Energy distribution, grid monetization. Where's that going?
That's a good question. That depends on the country.
I know.
So with India, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about Indian.
Let's talk globally.
Yeah, but in the US and Europe, I would say the grid, because renewable power is highly variable, sometimes you get negative energy prices.
Yes.
And utilizing those arbitrage, right? When there's negative prices, you're doing some work, whether it's chemical production or whatever is it that you're doing. If you're able to monetize that arbitrage, there's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you could also think about trading energy back to the grid, because the grid is somewhat not as well positioned to support this kind of electrification, global electrification. So we also made an investment into a solid state transformer company called Ampere Sand in Singapore. And the transformer is like one of the main nodal points of going from AC to DC. and most of the current that's coming into fast charging or in data centers or in electrolyzers, hydrogen electrolyzers, is all DC. So it almost feels like Tesla is back again, right? And it's an AC versus DC fight. So we need to be able to have transformers that are smaller, more compact, and can actually provide these electrified grids and allow trade from both sides.
So energy transitions are happening, and people should be aware of grid monetization and modernization. That's key. Very good. Okay, healthcare.
I think AI is going to really revolutionize healthcare because most of the diagnostics that we have today are based off of images. And maybe I'll take one step back. I think what we have today is sick care. We don't have health care.
Absolutely.
And
it's more reactive.
Correct. Everybody gets sick and then go to the doctor. I think that's all going to reverse. I would say that in about 5 to 10 years, we'll see that happening and being more prevalent everywhere. I think we are already wearing smart watches and such. I think people are getting more and more conscious about their health habits. But I would say even further, if you just forward the clock forward, I would say that diabetes should be just not be there. Hypertension, no reason for these diseases to be there. And yet we have the highest mortality from these kind of diseases. And it just feels crazy that we haven't taken a step forward, and we need to figure out incentives to make people more healthier versus buying insurance and doing it the opposite way.
It's interesting. Related to this is also food, and you made a nice investment in India with Fossil, which is in the agriculture, saving water, pesticide. And I'm sure they will watch that podcast and they'll enjoy it. You're the one who's talked to the founder there. What do you think about food revolution or food tech? People call it many ag tech, food tech. That's an industry that you track too sometimes.
Yeah, we do, because it's again a deep tech. Anything deep tech we track, right? Yes, how food is made, how food is grown, how food is proliferated and distributed. All of this, right? And maybe even dispensed, right? That's a problem we haven't tackled just yet. So we've seen a lot of companies in the autonomous robot space of weeding, harvesting, using AI, right? So you think about robots picking apples or robots doing a lot of that kind of work, weeds and
that's not science fiction, it's true.
No, it's happening today.
Yeah.
I mean, there are tractors that are out there that are purely autonomous.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a very constrained environment. There is no traffic. There are no cows on the street. You know exactly where to go, and you have a program that's written. It's like a Roomba, right? And it does all the work. And then we've seen companies that do very smart irrigation, only putting not only the right amount of water so that they don't really consume a lot of water, and also pesticides and such. Fuzzle is a perfect example of that, to augment the crop production. And then on the consumption side, we've seen a lot of smart foods. We haven't made an investment in that yet. So think about dairy. I've seen synthetic milk being made, synthetic meat being made, synthetic poultry that's already done. So I would feel that just the quality of that food is what is the main sort of delta right now. The moment it tastes the same, you pretty much get mass adoption of these, and proteins are going to be just grown in a lab and highly sustainable. And I'm super excited about food manufacturing.
And this is going to change manufacturing, retail, everything is linked.
Yeah.
So the whole chain is
because
linked.
You can control the shelf life, you can control through synthetic biology. It is unbelievable. The revolution that's happening is unprecedented. Sometimes I get scared. This is an area.
You're scared for humans, or
no? I'm scared that I'm not able to keep up with the science. It is that fast. It's a little bit like AI, generative AI. One day you have this, and suddenly another day you have a
The
new.
iterations keep changing so fast.
The speed is just going faster and faster.
Yeah, I mean, what frightened me is yesterday you could give, I mean, Sam Altman had put out something on X where you could just give prompts to a video and it'll make a video for you.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Sora.
It is
Sora
crazy.
AI. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even want to delve into it at this point of time because we are doing a video and tomorrow you and I can just be our faces and an AI could do it for you.
Yeah.
You can just prompt it.
Yeah, that's a different level of
yeah.
scare. But this is I get scared about this because I'd like to keep up with the science.
Yeah,
I simply am not able to because the speed at which because computation is driving the cycle of innovation in biology. Because biologists from the 90s, they all went to the lab like me, wore a coat and started pipetting and doing this kind of
I've
stuff.
seen those images and
It's very slow, iterative, based off of just almost like a hearsay sometimes or trial and error, gut feeling. But today it's really almost like a semiconductor manufacturing, right? You're like printing stuff, you're like writing code, and you're transcribing things into a genome, and it's unbelievable what's happening.
Before I come to the final two questions, you're talking about human behavior changing stuff that's happening in our era, in our lifetime. Is that something we have to get used to with these transitions in deep tech?
We already have.
Yes, we are. Yeah, absolutely. In many
I think
ways.
Change, again, to quote Vinod Khosla, change happens very fast. He showed one image in 2000 on Central Park, New York, where there were horses all over and one car. In 10 years or 12 years, Henry Ford brought Ford, and there was full of cars and one horse.
And in 10 years?
Same, 10 years. There's between 10 and 15 years.
It would be between 1905 to 1921, yeah.
I mean, can you believe 15 years ago we did not have this?
Yeah,
The first iPhone came in when? 2006?
Yeah, 2006-7
18 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not that, I mean...
Yeah, it's not too long, is it? Yes.
And I remember the first time I ever used a computer. I mean, now
remember
we're dating ourselves. But I remember learning on C, learning, all these basic languages.
Did you know 20 years ago when I was working on DOS in India?
Yeah, DOS.
Okay, do you remember DOS?
Yeah, of course.
Does anybody remember DOS? Put that in the comments. I started off writing on DOS as a
MS-DOS.
journalist. Yes.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Now there's AI writing it for you.
Yeah,
If you just
I
prompt
mean, sometimes I even write, birthday cards and stuff like this. You want to say nice things, you can just ask AI and then it'll tell you.
It's a good thing, right? The non-core stuff you outsource it to AI, and the core stuff like your blogs, you write it yourself.
Yes,
Let's set that in context.
I have to, because it's my words, right?
Absolutely.
Authenticity is the key in these blogs. And again, the ultimate goal for me is to share.
Yes.
So people can use it readily, and it shouldn't be a secret.
No, that's great. So, my final two questions would be one, it's about the TDK goodness and what the goodness means in India. I'm putting it out there that being a journalist for 20 years, tracked a lot of funds. You're the first fund that's really saying that, look, we love the Indian deep tech community and we'll be there for you. What does TDK goodness mean to you?
I think it's about providing capital and beyond. Most VCs or most other firms provide capital, and that's the most important thing, and that's needed, right? What's beyond is all the stuff that I was talking about from the Dream Syndicate perspective, right? When you have a product, let's say you're making an energy storage battery, something like that. Imagine you needed an inverter. Where are you going to get that from? And let's say the inverter is back ordered. We can actually utilize the network of TDK and get suggestions from our mothership, because TDK has an ecosystem that they have built. So this type of goodness or beyond capital, what we bring, we call it as TDK goodness. And that's just one example I can get you. There's so many other things that we do. We spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs to help them market themselves. Even before going out to a round, we help them pitch and refine the pitch. We provide them help on their product development roadmaps, give them lots of feedback on their own supply chain and their resiliency to supply chains and such. So I would say anything that goes beyond capital that involves TDK and its ecosystem and maybe even its customers. Sometimes we made introductions. I remember one time there was this person who said, hey, I've got FDA clearance on this product and it's a pediatric product. I want to commercialize this, but this thing is back ordered. Can you help me? And the first thing that came to me was I wanted to drop everything. I said, this is a pediatric product. You know, I have a child, I have 2 children. And I was like, whoa, what if it's for my child, right? And I dropped everything. I picked up the phone and called Israel, and TDK has an office in Israel. And those guys contacted the right people. And within a matter of 12 or 13 days, these guys had the product shipped to their office. So they were able to commercialize the product. So to me, that type of
that's
help,
the goodness. It's value.
Yes, it's value beyond capital that we can provide. We can always do that. We don't always have the solution, but once in a while when we can deliver, we can actually deliver. And that type of support is really appreciated by entrepreneurs and also your co-investors. And this is why I like to say that the Dream Syndicate is about that community. And once you build the community, then you basically, there is cross portfolio fertilization. Like sometimes, when we invite 2 entrepreneurs and just in the car ride, right, to some place, one place to another place, they would have had a collaboration figured out. And so many times it's happened to us. And just because they know that we support it, we augment it, we even encourage it. And
Very nice.
Ultimately, they'll do only things that bring value to them. They won't just do it because we are saying that.
No, this is interesting. This is on so many levels an interview that's brought so much perspective to me, and I hope the scientific community, the deep tech entrepreneurs out there enjoy this. But I can't let you go that easily. I still have a couple of questions. You use a lot of analogy of sport in all your presentations, in everything that you mention. Sports has made you competitive. We've known each other as sports people. In our younger days, we did a lot of sport, and you do a lot of sport even today. You do tennis. When you're seated in your area, that's interesting, which is good in your locality.
It's a small locality.
It's fine. It's still, you're playing, right? Sports. My first question would be today, as you're a cricketer, you love cricket, so cricket has so much money and there's so much data around their healthcare, the stats. It's almost like a warrior. The cricketer is like a warrior today. Is like bionics or something. There's so much being tracked. Would you like that to? If Anil would go back in time and had all that data, would you be an IPL cricketer today?
Of course, I would have chosen that career. It's probably because of my parents, right? They always wanted me to be a sports person.
Yeah.
And
although you came from an academic family, unlike others, your parents wanted you to play sports. That's
Correct.
an interesting thing. And that shaped your career.
Yes, and I wasn't very good at it.
No, you're being modest.
I was being good enough to play in a certain level, not good enough to play in the right sort of the highest level. So I think everybody has talents for certain
But
things.
you remember how much we got paid, no? $1
Yeah.
a game. Less than $1.
But I don't think pay would change that, right?
Yeah.
I think talent is raw talent.
Agreed.
And I think the incentives drive behaviors,
Yes.
of course. But what I would say is there is something about talent, and there are people who are born to do something. And I must say, I was good enough, but not really as good.
But I'm saying the data available today could have been shared with us. We'd have made something out of it. Do you think?
Perhaps.
On hindsight.
Hindsight is 2020, right? And I'm not sure where I would have gone. Where I am today is I am playing a competitive sport.
Yes.
And to me, investing is hyper competitive.
Yeah, I agree.
And to add value to these entrepreneurs and to win the next entrepreneur over, right, it involves a lot of small things, getting small things right. And I'm happy that I can now play this sport for another 40 years. Whereas if I was an IPL cricketer, I would be fizzled out by about 35.
Yeah, because you'd been burnt out. You'd been burnt out. Your body.
Not yet, but
your
you're
body
done.
would have. Yeah, you're done. Absolutely.
MS Dhoni is done at 40, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be done. I
As an
play Le
investor.
Mans Pierre Lamont is 92 years old plus, and he's still investing.
That's the investment game.
Correct.
You play the long ball, man.
Correct.
Which is good. And I have to ask you, yes, sports is important to us, family is very important to you. How much of that has influenced your life? And I want to leave this podcast with a couple of things, right? There are certain books that you'd have read or something that would have influenced you. I want you to make those recommendations as well.
Oh my. I don't know.
Just whatever comes to your mind. I know I threw a curveball at you.
No.
But I would love to hear this.
The stuff that I read are actually not related to my work, right? The stuff that I read is just purely fictional, and I derive a lot of like joy out of reading. I don't want reading to be more like, okay, I want to learn and I want to just get better at this. I'm not that types. I learn a lot from people.
Yeah, you told me that.
I watch people and I study people and I respect people and I really do learn from people. The books that I read are really fictional and it's just for pure joy.
And scientific journals also.
Sometimes, yeah. I think there are some books that have made a huge impact on me.
Mention one, name one.
I mean, I think the one that had the biggest impact was, I can't remember the name. It was about the top 10 mathematicians who lived ever.
Yeah, I have that book.
Something like that.
It's a compendium of the mathematicians who changed the world.
Correct.
I have that book
And
myself. Yes.
I couldn't stop but thinking these guys were the smartest people ever to live. And they were the pettiest
It's called
people.
the men of mathematics. Or
Yeah, exactly. And they were the pettiest people. and I couldn't understand the dichotomy between the two. Because what I then realized was these are just people.
Yeah.
Right? They're the greatest in their field, but they're just people. They are still filled with jealousy. They're still filled with all the human nature.
Weaknesses,
right?
yes.
So to me, that opened up a new part of me. Because I used to be a huge kind of I used to get carried away with celebrities and things like this when I was young. But as I've grown up,
as teenagers, who isn't?
I meet great people, right? And I don't want to be starstruck, right? And I want to speak to them just like humans. And it taught me how to be human and also criticize them if they said something that didn't make sense or if there was a fact that was slightly off. I would actually go and speak to them in their level. So it really helped me as a person.
Lovely. And what about family? Quick word.
I mean, it's everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my dad is my inspiration, and he's really helped me to be the way I am today. I don't think I was very patient as a young person, but after having children, I think I've become much more patient.
As a father, yeah, I know, get
so
that. Yeah.
Thanks to my kids and my dad, and of course my mom is the one who pushed me to play cricket, and she's the one who's the hyper competitive person. So the competitiveness comes from my mom, the compassion comes from my father. So I think and my wife, she teaches me and keeps me grounded. I think that's a key part. Whenever I kind of slightly veer away, she's always there to bring me back and saying, hey, you were here before. Just remember, you came from nothing.
So, Anil, thank you for keeping it human. I'm really inspired by this. And one thing I have learned from this is that you keep your family close. Investment is a game, but you got to be true to yourself. You need to have empathy, compassion. And I like the fact that you said you want to bring down all this, the fact that we're all driven by idol worship, and you want to break that down and say, let's all be human. That was fantastic. And I hope the TDK goodness helps all our deep tech entrepreneurs. And I still remember those days when we as sportsmen were supported by parents. Our parents used to show up at 5 in the morning, my God, and cricket was as competitive. And those in the US can relate to this because their parents go and see football, right? That was how cricket was in India. Thank you for this, and I wish TDK all the best in India. And if you're a deep tech entrepreneur, please write into us and we'll get Anil to answer all your questions. Be part of the TDK goodness in India. They are in Indranagar, 80 feet road in Bangalore. So please drop in and enjoy the community that they're building it. Let's build a dream syndicate. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vishal.
Thank you.